Welcome everyone. I'm delighted that you joined us for today's MTI Research Snaps webinar, Uncharted Territory 2024 Cybersecurity Insurance and Transit Landscape. My name is Dr. Hilary Nixon, and I am Deputy Executive Director of the Mineta Transportation Institute at San Jose State University. MTI is a university transportation center funded by the U.S. Department of Transportation that leads 4 competitively selected multi-university consortia focused on improving mobility of people and goods. MTI's mission is to increase mobility for all by improving the safety, efficiency, accessibility, and convenience of our nation's transportation system. We accomplish this through surface transportation research, technology transfer, education, and workforce development. In today's webinar, we are discussing the current cybersecurity landscape, especially insurance and regulation evolutions, and the impact they have on transit. Let's learn more about how to improve cyber resiliency and work together to mitigate the risks of cyber attacks. Our speakers today are Scott Belcher and Todd Cholet. Scott Belcher is an MTI Research Associate, co-founder of Cyberbase, and Chief Executive of SFB Consulting. He works at the intersection of transportation, technology, and communication, and advises public and private entities on transformative transportation technology issues such as cybersecurity, sustainability, artificial intelligence, and more. Todd Cholet is a risk advisor and cyber practice leader at Sunstar Insurance Group. He advises business leaders across a wide range of industries on comprehensive insurance and risk management solutions with specific expertise in cyber and professional liability. Welcome, Scott and Todd.
Hello there.
During the webinar, if you have any questions for our presenter, you can submit them through the chat or Q&A feature. We are recording this webinar, and the link to view will be available shortly on our webinar and social media pages. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. Scott and Todd, I give you the floor.
Well, thank you, Hilary, and thanks for...
Go ahead, Todd.
Go ahead. Okay. I was just pulling up the presentation here, Scott, if you want to introduce.
No, so I'm Scott Belcher. It's great to be here. And Todd and I put together did this study. We both have been working in the cybersecurity space for the last couple of years. And when we started to look at where the insurance market was, we saw a lot of movement that surprised us. And so it caused us to do a deeper dive. And so Todd's going to kind of walk you through our findings, and then we'll take questions.
Thank you, Scott. Today we'll talk about 3 things that we found in the white paper that we published. First being the changes in the cyber threat landscape that we've seen really over the past 5 years or so, bringing us to today, and then responses to that landscape by insurance carriers and then public transit agencies, and then recommendations that we've made and identified to improve cybersecurity posture within the public transportation industry. It should come as no surprise that changes in the cyber threat landscape have really been just a dramatic increase of attacks over the past few years. We continue to see attacks increase every year, ransomware increasing, and transit is no different, and they're not safe from the attacks. Really, no business, no enterprise is safe. Doesn't matter how sizable the business is, or what industry it's in. Really, no one is safe from the threat of cyber attacks. Specifically, sometimes we get the question of, we're small, we're not on anybody's radar, why would we be concerned about this? And we found data to show that 98% of claims come from the small and medium-sized enterprises, which would indicate that it's not just the names that you see in the news that are at risk from cyber attacks. Responses that we've seen from insurance carriers and public agencies, really the story begins a number of years ago, I'd say in the late teens. The businesses and agencies were really just relying on cyber insurance policies to handle the risk and transferring it to a cyber insurance policy. And cyber insurance carriers were, we've found, really underwriting the risk somewhat poorly. And then as cyber attacks increased, the impact on cyber insurers and their profitability was really damaged. And I'd say around 2021, 2022, we saw a lot of changes within underwriting and pricing from cyber insurance companies. If you were involved in renewing a cyber insurance policy in 21 and 22, likely you would have seen dramatic increases in premiums, in retentions, tighter, more underwriting requirements in terms of applications, looking for a lot more processes, technology in place, and employee training, incident response plans in place. Really just a whole list of things that underwriters were now requiring of policyholders in order to gain insurance. In the past couple of years, we've seen this level out, and I think that's a combination of a lot of businesses have put controls into place, but there's still a lot that have not. On the public agency side, we, in response to these insurance carrier requirements and the increased pricing and the increased retentions, we saw various responses from just adjusting coverage to fit the budget, reducing coverage in order to make the insurance coverage more affordable. We saw some agencies look to self-insure, and by that I mean actually going through an assessment, understanding their risk, and then understanding if they can handle the impact, the financial impact of a cyber attack. We've seen others explore risk pools, like one we've seen out in Washington that the paper referred to. And then a lot of agencies continue just to do nothing, which of course we would not recommend, and is probably the worst response in ensuring cyber resiliency. And the last part of the thing we'll talk about is recommendations and areas we've identified in which public transportation can improve cyber resiliency. The first being recommendations for transit agencies to take action, implement and assess your cybersecurity risk and implement a cybersecurity program. There's resources available to do this. More and more are becoming available all the time, whether that's through CISA, their website, your insurance carrier, if you have insurance, has resources available. Insurance brokers have resources available. Of course, there's third parties, there's assessments available online. Really just recognizing that there's a risk is extremely important, and then starting to do something now is the top of the recommendations. From a cyber insurance perspective, in that industry, a lot of progress has been made in improving applications, policy structure, terminology. It was really confusing for not only the policyholders, but also brokers have struggled to really interpret policies and understand the variations between the two and what's really covered and what's not covered. So the industry as a whole, I think, has made a lot of progress in that regard. And with that said, I think it's still important, if you're a policyholder, to really lean on a broker that understands cyber insurance to ensure that everything that you anticipate to be covered is covered. You understand your exposures and understand how the policy is going to respond. The second bullet under cyber insurance being awareness of the insurer-insured partnership. This relates to the relationship between the policyholder and their insurance carriers. Of course, insurance carriers want to reduce claims just as much as the policyholder, and carriers have programs and risk engineers available for policyholders to utilize to help them understand their risk, to help them reduce their risk. And the uptake and utilization of these resources is really low. And so I'd like to see, more utilization of this, more understanding from policyholders that the insurers are on their side and trying to help them reduce their risk and limit claims. From the administration standpoint, grant programs are now requiring cyber insurance programs to be in place. And so ensuring that you understand what is required of you if you're applying for these grants is important. And then there has been continued conversations about a federal cyber insurance backstop, and could fall on either side of the fence of this or somewhere in the middle of what this would do to stabilize the cyber insurance markets, to you could give more assurance that cyber insurance carriers would be able to respond to catastrophic claims. In terms of the paper, those are the three topics we discussed. Hillary, did you want to go through some questions?
Let's jump in. Absolutely. So first of all, thank you so much for giving us an overview of the findings and recommendations from your study. I certainly invite our guests at the webinar today to submit questions using the Q&A feature. But let's get started, because we had some questions that were submitted earlier. So, we certainly are seeing, and your perspective talks about that more of us are becoming aware of the importance of cybersecurity in transit. But there still seems to be this gap in knowledge for some transit professionals who may not understand how cyber attacks can really affect and disrupt our industry in a multitude of ways. So what are some of the most common misconceptions when it comes to cybersecurity, and what do you wish more people knew?
Hi, Hillary. Thanks for the question. So I think the biggest misconception is that it's not going to happen to me, or that it won't happen to me. We're either too small, or we're the good guys, or and what we see on a regular basis is that these are criminals, and they're criminal enterprises, and they franchise. They know how to use AI. They know how to use technology, and so it doesn't matter to them the size. I've worked with just as many small agencies that have suffered a hack as I have bigger ones. And the common refrain is, we're the good guys. Why would they come after us? And I have to remind them that. And so I think that's the first misconception. And then I think the second major misconception is that, it's too difficult, or it's too expensive, or it's too complicated to deal with cybersecurity. And while cybersecurity is complicated and can be expensive, for many agencies who haven't done anything, kind of doing an assessment, putting your policies and procedures in place, like multi-factor authentication, password protection, network segmentation, means training. If you do those things, it's like you're in a neighborhood and the criminal goes door to door, and if the door is locked, they don't go in. So you're dramatically reducing the likelihood that you'll be attacked. I'm not saying you're not going to get attacked, because you are, but you're also dramatically reducing the impact of that attack. And those basic elements do not require a whole lot of resources. And then the final thing is, in which Todd mentioned, is that there are resources available, either through the state DOT, through the federal government, through other local programs, and through your insurance broker. And that, I guess I would also really emphasize for small and mid-sized agencies that one place they might want to look is whether their state has a pooled insurance fund, because that's a good way to get access to a lot of resources at a relatively inexpensively.
Right. Well, I want to follow up on this because I think there's a great question that came in from Alan, one of our guests today. And you've been talking a lot about particularly small and medium-sized transit organizations. And Alan asks, well, could you give us some concrete examples of what are some of the various types of impacts that small and medium transit organizations have faced? Is it shut down operations? Is it back office work? Is it all of those things? So do you have a couple examples that you could share just to make it a little bit real for our audience?
Sure. I worked with an agency that was providing services to the poor, and they had 30 buses. They had their internal operating information, internal management information on one server, and then they had their customer information on another server. They were hacked, and it was a ransomware attack. The state didn't allow people to pay ransomware, so they lost all of their customer data. And this was an on-demand service that was taking people to adult daycare, to child support, or child daycare, to doctor's appointments. And the only thing that really helped them was the fact that they had a lot of this paper. They had a paper trail, and they had to rebuild their entire customer database. And the worst part about it was the parent organization didn't think that at the end of the day, the parent organization didn't make any changes because they didn't think it would apply to them what happened to that small agency. So that's an example. We've just seen an example in Philadelphia where SEPTA was attacked, and they had to take down their ability to communicate digitally to their customers was shut down for multiple months. So that means their app, that means their digital signage, that meant a lot of important things.
Great, thank you. And there's another interesting question. This one, I don't know if it'll be, Scott, better for you or Todd, so I'll put it out there and either one of you can jump in. So we know that our transit agencies don't simply work on their own. They have subcontracts, they've got service agreements and relationships with various other contractors and vendors that are working with the transit agencies. And so Ian asks, well, what are some recommendations, resources they could use to help them with the contract language when they're working with those contractors to make sure that everyone is protected from a cybersecurity perspective? And Scott, I know you actually did a study for us a couple years ago specifically related to vendors.
Yeah, so I'll take a first cut and then Todd can jump in. We did do a study. It's on the MTI website. It was a detailed study about the relationship between transit agencies and their vendors and how that can help or hurt. And I think the important thing is those relationships are important. And if you don't have an understanding about responsibilities, that's a big deal. The second part of that is a lot of the hardware that you're operating is proprietary and old. And so it doesn't have updated firmware, it doesn't have updated patches. And so as you look to update your hardware, your operational technology, you want to make sure that you're thinking about who's responsible for keeping it up to date and making sure that you've got that in your language. APTA has a cybersecurity work group and a procurement work group that's actually working on model language that you can use. ITS America has some model, or USDOT ITS Joint Program Office has some model language. Kind of the bottom line from my perspective is you want to make sure that your vendors realize that they have a responsibility to have a mature cybersecurity program in place, and that you have the benefit from that. But that doesn't mean to hire a consultant who doesn't understand the space to write your procurement, because then you're going to price vendors out if they don't know what they're doing. And we see that on a regular basis. We see procurements that are out there that are not that vendors can't respond to because they're inconsistent requirements or overburdensome requirements that aren't applicable to their application. A specific example of that was a contractor that I helped in in California that had a requirement for a $50 million insurance premium on a $10 million contract, which was a basic IT contract. And that turned out to be something that they just simply couldn't, they tried to pass the costs on and they couldn't, and they didn't prevail.
Thank you. Todd, did you want to?
Yeah, I could add to Scott's, response there. And the contract requirement, that's something that you can work with your insurance broker on as well, and to understand that have them look at that contract language from an insurance perspective and just give them perspective on if the limits are even attainable, if the limits are market average, or where they kind of fall. So that's one thing I would say. And the other thing I would say is that an insurance policy can have what's called dependent business interruption coverage. And so understanding how that coverage responds to a breach against one of your vendors or a system failure of one of your vendors is important. And we saw that in action about a week and a half ago with the CrowdStrike issue. And that's going to be interesting how that all sorts out, is how policy language responds to CrowdStrike.
So I have a question that was submitted earlier, and it's actually one of my favorite questions. So I think, as employees with transit agencies and vendors and whomever we work for, I think sometimes we see things and we have questions or concerns, and we don't necessarily know how to bring them up, who to talk to with our employers. So one of the questions was, do you have a recommended way for an employee to bring up concerns with their employer as it relates to cybersecurity?
That's a great question. Actually, I've never been asked that question before. Let me answer it maybe a different way than you want, and then I'll try to answer it the proper way. So I think the key part of cybersecurity is it's an enterprise risk, and many agencies, many private companies think that it's an IT issue and that it's a technology issue, and it's really, well, it has a technology component. It is an enterprise-wide process. So that means that the executive management needs to be involved in cybersecurity. HR needs to be involved in cybersecurity. Operations everybody needs to be involved. And so that kind of brings me full circle to answering the question. Is I think it's important, if you have a concern about cybersecurity, that you raise it, you start with your supervisor. But if you have a legitimate concern, you need to think about other places to raise it, whether it's HR or whether it's with the executive team. because it is, I mean, I can't tell you how many agencies I've walked in and been told by the CEO, IT's got it. And then when I go and talk to IT, it's evident that IT may have some of it, but they don't have the vast majority of the things that we have talked about, which are more operational in nature, more governance in nature, and more policy in nature.
Thank you. So, there was another question that was submitted earlier that I found really interesting because in this day and age, we're all hearing about artificial intelligence, AI, large language models, image, video, audio search and those kind of things. I certainly can't turn on the TV without seeing some ad related to Gemini or ChatGPT. But how does advances in artificial intelligence change the threat and cyber defenses as well?
Todd, do you want to take a first cut?
Yeah, I think a lot of that still remains to be seen, for one thing. But I think when people think of AI and cybersecurity, their immediate thought goes to the risk and how much more difficult it's going to be to spot, fake emails and which is all true, but it also is helping, we get carriers and underwriters from cyber insurance companies excited about how it's going to make the defenses easier and easier to underwrite and understand the risk and spot the risk as well. So I think it's important to think of both sides. Where we've seen, I think, some examples already is in social engineering situations where AI is able to impersonate voices and video in order to authorize payment instructions, which is going to be really difficult to identify. I'll stop there, Scott. If you have a thought to.
No, I mean,
Okay.
I think that's fine. I'll stop there. I'll give Hillary another.
Yeah, I want to get to, because I know we're getting close to the end of our 30-minute webinar. So I want to have a question. I want both of you to answer it, and relatively quickly if possible. So, if you could have, your wish come true, what is something that you wish more people understood about cybersecurity, cyber insurance, and how they are important to public transit agencies? So maybe let's start with Scott, and then we'll go to Todd. What do you wish people knew?
I wish, like I said, I think I started with this. I wish that people knew that that getting started is what's important. It's a continual process. It never ends. And so you have to manage it like any other risk. And you can start, and you should start with an assessment, and that'll identify your risks. And then you prioritize them within your enterprise, like every other risk. And you can do a lot without spending a lot of money.
Like that. Todd, how about you?
I think within cyber insurance specifically, there's just a lot of times misunderstanding of what resources are available from cyber insurance carriers. I've seen everything from matching dollar for dollar spending upwards of $5,000 up to improve your cybersecurity posture, to there's a lot of just free resources from employee training and a lot of just resources that I think policyholders let go unused and underutilized.
Great. Thank you. If it's quick, if either one of you, because I just see Patrick put a post in, you referenced some resources online for cyber insurance contract language. If you could quickly post that in the chat, that would be super helpful, because I'm going to wrap things up. So with that, I think our time has come to an end. So Todd, Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. I would certainly encourage all of you, if you hadn't had a chance already, to take a look at the final report. which is available on the MTI website and which we've dropped into the chat as well. I know we didn't get to everyone's questions, but I know that our researchers are always more than happy to engage and reach out and answer additional questions. So feel free to contact us so we can put you in touch with them. And certainly for more information about the upcoming webinars and recent publications, please visit our website. And Scott, thank you. I'm going to, Patrick, just letting you know, if you look at the ITS JPO website, there's a link there on model cybersecurity language for ITS. So that's the ITS JPO website. And with that, I'm going to wrap things up and thank you all.
Thank you.